Good morning, everyone. I'm really upset there's no media alerts today. So, good gracious. I apologize for that yesterday. But I am Dave Fowler. I'm the Chief Privacy and Deliverability Officer for Marketfish. And it's great to be here this morning with really three stellar individuals. And to introduce real quick Neil Capel for Sailthrough. Neil is a founder and CEO of Sailthrough, a leading SaaS user analysis and predictive behavior platform for publishers, advertisers, and retailers. The history of working at large-scale, high-demand web systems led him to develop Sailthrough unique capabilities in handling mass-to-one personalization content on-site and in email. He has served as CTO for Money Media, Small World, Music Nation, and as advisor of Refinery29.com, Zutu.com, Behance.com, among others, right? Is anybody else missing up? No. Okay, very good. And then Sailthrough is succeeding in catering to the individual, rewarding user engagement with priority delivery and content tailored to who they are, proving that there is true worth of a database in knowing what engages each individual and providing quality content. Welcome. Cassie Young gets the Panelist of the Year award. Cassie wasn't supposed to be panelist until Thursday of last week, stepped up to the plate, and she's here today, so congratulations to be here. Save there's a bit of a jam. She's the Vice President of Marketing at Savored, formerly known as Village Vines, where she manages all consumer acquisition and CRM strategies, business analytics and insights, and strategic partnerships and business development efforts, right? So you've got a lot on your plate. Email is the #1 driver of transaction volume on Savored.com, and Cassie is thus heavily focused on email relevance to improve member LTV. Savored is a service that offers insider pricing of 30% off all food and drink at over 700 leading restaurants in 10 cities across the US, and seeks to address the adage that most expensive tables in a restaurant are the empty ones. Consumers use Savored to book reservations and enjoys 30% off discounts without any coupons, which is a good thing. Restaurants use Savored to increase profitability by filling otherwise empty tables with our qualified subscribers.
Welcome. I just want to add there that if you're not signed up to Savored, you really should be. And even on this slow internet connection here right now, you should really just do it right now, because the restaurants they have and the deals they have are fantastic.
And I couldn't make the shameless plug, so I'm glad that you did. Thanks.
I thought it was no shameless plugs this morning. Okay, well, I'll do mine at the end. That's right. And last but by no means least, Jacob Shin from Savings.com. And Jacob serves as Director of Online Marketing and Customer Acquisition and joined Savings in April of 2009 to be the driver in growth and execution of paid search and online marketing initiatives. Savings.com works closely with online retailers like Black Country, Orbitz, and HP, and distribute deals and coupons to savvy consumers. Prior to joining Savings, Jacob successfully managed multi-million-dollar high-volume search campaigns across finance and travel verticals for Low.com and Lowfares.com, respectively. He has been actively involved in the online marketing space in 2004 and graduated from the University of California, San Diego. So a lot of meat up here, right, in terms of the depth and breadth of knowledge. So it's great to be here. I'm going to kick it off with the first question. Could someone on the panel define 21st century marketing intelligence for us, please?
Well, I'll take first stab at that. I mean, that's really what our company is about, and you explained a lot of it. I mean, we really believe in the individual marketing aspect and not really the sort of aggregate mass kind of testing that needs to take place to learn what you want to put out there, but very much individualized targeting. A lot of this conference has been about innovation, and a lot of it has been about how do you get to that level of marketing, but everyone tends to talk in the aggregate version, i.e. we have 20% that are disengaged, we have 10% that are engaged, we have, it's much more about trying to figure out how to target those individuals. If you're saying, well, we're going to do a re-engagement campaign to the 30% that are disengaged right now, you're already too late. You've missed that boat. You're only going to get the outliers from that. And they're effective campaigns, so you should do them, absolutely. But frankly, what you should be doing is hitting that user at the time that they disengage. So today, there maybe is only 3 that disengage from your email list. But at the same time, tomorrow there might be 5, and the next day there may be 0. But you have to hit them at that time. Hitting a sort of an aggregate kind of portion of this is very much the testing of throwing things up against the wall and seeing what sticks. You have to be behaviorally targeting, not segmenting.
Sounds kind of painful.
It is painful if you're not using us. But you've got to link the... I'm sure there's a lot of people here that are piling in information into their ESPs right now. They probably do. How many of the audience have e-commerce or other external stats that they're pulling into their ESP in a batch format? Is there anyone doing that to sort of link up stuff so they can do lookups and all that kind of thing? No? So your ESP, so I guess that comes back to was it Ken's question when about how many targeting on their demographics. I mean, if you're not pulling in the data from your current into your ESP, you should be for sure. Purchase history is amazingly important. One of the things that we look at on our purchase side is looking at not only we're hooked in real time, we look at as people purchase so that we can see they purchase on a cycle of every 3 weeks and they have this kind of interest. But I guess, and that's to Ken's point as well, there's very much the psychographic profiling.
Kaz, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I think timing is of the utmost importance, but the other thing that I would mention is placement. So I think a lot of the conversations from yesterday morning are a great seg into this conversation where we were talking about kind of the divergence between email behavior and site behavior. And one of the big things we found is, I know we talked about yesterday, just because someone doesn't open your emails doesn't mean that they're a disengaged subscriber. So the ability to really work on a single platform where you're merging all of that data about your consumer, you can hit them not only at the right time, but in the right place. So it may turn out that email is not the right outlet for this particular person. It may be a site alert window when they come back to the homepage. Getting them in that particular outlet will actually probably increase the propensity to get them back to where you want them to be. So if they're not opening email, but they're having a great site experience, you're increasing the propensity for them to come back to email, and then vice versa. So I think it's definitely the meshing of both timing as well as the appropriate placement.
Jake, you've been in several verticals, right? When you think about 21st century, what are you going to be doing differently in terms of your mindset as it relates to that whole concept?
Sure. So I think in this world of Facebook feeds and real-time Twitter feeds, we definitely need to try and personalize. So I know I come from a search background, and I know there's been a lot of talk about display. So there's a lot of remarketing efforts right now, retargeting, trying to get your demographics. And I know, a case in point, Eric Kirby's company trying to get all this aggregate data to give you some sort of directional, sampling of who your audience is. What we do at Savings is we try to do a true one-to-one marketing strategy with email. So we will match up everybody's, online on-site behavior as well as preference center selections to customize your subset of coupons and deals that you might be interested in. We've all heard the story of how many times are you going to see a Groupon deal for a mani-pedi before you unsubscribe from it, right? So I think relevance is key. And I think as we move into the 21st century, or as we think about 21st century marketing, the reason we all probably ignore billboards is because most of the time it's not relevant. It might be interesting to see, but after you completely turn blind to it. So in order to stay relevant, to have people opening your email and to be really engaged with your email product and your campaigns, we really focus on a true one-to-one personalization and real-time optimization of that feed, similar to how Facebook would do it, so that you are looking at the information and the data set that's most relevant to you.
So you brought up the R word, right? So good sort of segue into that. How is that going to change, as we move into the 21st century model? How does relevancy change from today versus 5 years from now?
I think people are a lot more selective, and now they have more of a voice because of all the outlets like Twitter and Facebook. So if they're not happy with what you're delivering, not only will they unsubscribe, but they may tweet about it or post it on Facebook. So I think in order to stay relevant, you really have to look at the data, and I think again, Neil can probably speak to this as well, but it's a huge pain point. It's a lot of data to crunch through, and not all of us have the resources to even just do list hygiene, let alone go through our data warehouses and try to find data that helps us to target better. But I think it's just a necessary evil, and I think that's the way that the industry is going to eventually go.
So, okay, so what does relevance give the end user in your mind?
I think the relevance is giving the respect to the end users, the respect in their inbox. You've got so much more email coming at you in the last couple of years than ever before, thanks to group buying deals and just becoming more popular. More people have email addresses than ever before, and that will continue to go on. Having the respect with that end user is what you need to do to have the relevance. And to Della's point as well, of that you're emailing people that are seeing the subject line. They may not be opening, but they are still conducting commerce with you. It's about bridging that Della gap, as I like to call it, which is really that how do you know that those users that aren't opening are still conducting that conversion with you. So you've got to tie that into your system so that you can actually see that happening and really be able to not only just send those emails out to people, but really respect that inbox at the same time. So vary the frequency and increase relevancy, that kind of thing.
So how do you massage that in terms of your program going forward?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think just to follow up on both of the last two questions, I think one thing that we have to be really cognizant about is that as the press kind of continues this scrutiny around what Facebook is doing with your data and things like that, there's a sensitivity there now that probably wasn't there 2 years ago. So the big challenge for us is we want to be as relevant as possible, but I had a brand management professor in grad school who used to talk about the spandex rule, and the spandex rule was just because you can doesn't mean you should. And we take that into close account at Savor, because I can tell you anecdotally, an example here is, we did an email where we told people where their friends had dined, if their friends had invited them to join Savor, and people flipped out. They actually absolutely hated that. People are obviously very guarded about their diets and what they're ordering at restaurants and things like that. But if you do something that's a little bit more subtle, like Savor's most popular Mexican restaurant was around the corner from you last month, that's something that's not touching. It's very relevant to them, but it's not taking it too far. So it's a challenge, but it's also something exciting as we look forward to figuring out what's going to work. But obviously keeping in mind those constraints.
Good, thanks. Jacob, how do you drive ongoing optimization in terms of the roadmap for yourself?
So we do something that we're actually pretty proud of. In our emails, we treat our emails kind of like a Facebook feed where every deal, so if you're not familiar with savings, we aggregate and we provide online coupons for most e-commerce sites, so like the Backcountries and the HPs of the world. So after you've told us a couple things about where you shop and what brands you like, we match a set of deals to you. And in the email, with each deal, you have the option to say, I don't like this category anymore, or I don't like this merchant anymore, so stop showing me these. And there's also a discovery component as well. So that's kind of our ongoing optimization effort, because we want to know that our algorithm is doing what it's supposed to do and give you relevant deals. And we also see that in the click-to-open rates and all the KPIs. But so we take the email information along with our on-site activity, and so we combine those two. So it's a little bit of implicit and explicit data that we use to optimize your personal feed, basically.
Cool. If any questions on the audience, please raise your hand and grab a mic, and we'll take them. Neil, in terms of B2B and B2C, what is different in terms of how you balance those interests within the roadmap?
For us, I mean, we do everything from the B2B to B2C side of email that we're sending out. Again, to harp on, because we're linking the web experience with the individual email experience, we can then draw on that to actually target that information, if it is a B2C or a B2B client, because frankly we can know that a user is more interested in certain things. And if you use politics as an example, I mean, we can know that a potential voter has an interest in this particular area, budgeting or whatever, finance, whatever it is, so that we can target that subject line and that piece of content for that user, so that we can engage with them and have that communication going. Right. So it's always, having the web traffic piece and not just conversions. I'm not talking about conversion pixels. I'm talking about looking at every single page view of every single user. Then you can actually create highly targeted emails and automatically, so that you're not actually, there's no real manual workload in actually deploying this. It's actually happening on the fly.
Cassie?
I couldn't agree more about the page view component there. Savor is a pretty interesting model because we face both the B2B and B2C sides, but our business is actually focused on, it's a demand management platform for restaurants. So we measure our success as how much incremental revenue do we drive to restaurants. But our revenue comes from booking fees that we take from the consumer. So it's an interesting question of, do we show consumers the most relevant offers that inevitably go to the top 50 restaurants that we have, and then we're kind of ignoring these other 150 restaurants we're working with in New York. So what we found is by looking at that page view data, we can get some extrapolations where we say, okay, well, you know what, you had a propensity to go to these super popular restaurants, but now let's parlay those interests that you have into those sort of offers that are not as likely to be as popular, but there are points points of relevance there. So I think this, again, just speaks to taking kind of your email engagement to the next level and really understanding what your user is doing on site in addition to what they're looking at or clicking at in the emails.
Jacob?
So the way we balance it is savings.com is essentially a publisher. So we are in the business of promoting everybody else's brand. So we have to work closely with our merchant partners to make sure that they're being surfaced and being given visibility. But the challenge, again, is being consumer focused. Do you, as a consumer, want to see a 30% off deal at Old Navy, or would you rather see a 50% off deal at some mom and pop shop that's only based out of somewhere in Boston? So it's kind of a delicate balance, and also the monetization behind it. We monetize on bigger brands, so how do we balance that as well? So we definitely try to utilize the discovery portion. So similar to what Cassie said, there's a discovery component to our emails where we're trying to surface a lot of the more attractive deals from maybe smaller, lesser known retailers, while still trying to promote the bigger brands that most people appeal to.
Okay. And so one last question on relevance, and then we're going to sort of move into an area that's not near and dear to my heart in terms of big brother, big sister, and we'll open up that box for discussion here in a minute. But in terms of when you're thinking about making big bets versus incremental tweaks in your program, what's the optimizations concerned? What are you thinking about as it relates to that? Yes.
Sure. So this is something that we face every single day, just because, again, so much of our transaction volume does come from email. So in terms of when we think about incremental tweaks, we think about finding these little nuggets that work well with people. So we noticed you haven't dined with us in a while. We want to whet your appetite with a free credit, something along those lines. But at the same time, we have to make big bets, and that kind of goes back to what I was chatting about before with the spandex rule of you can't be afraid to try things out. And I think this has been a theme that's emerged throughout all the conversations that have been here. If you think something's going to work, try it out. If people don't like it, I would encourage you to react accordingly. But I think that's definitely a big takeaway.
Okay, Jacob.
So we try to always have always be testing mentality. So whether it's 5%, 10% of your audience, or whether it's with new subscribers who are not already accustomed to your traditional email. So that's where we do a lot of testing. And so we get immediate feedback from the people who are the most engaged, and so we find that to be the most useful.
Well, for us, I mean, we obviously work with our clients, and a lot of them have different ideals around what they want to do. But some of the testing in incremental, I mean, for us, being a behavioral targeting sort of platform for email, the aspect of going full hog behavioral is normally a case of let's take 10% of your list and we'll do behavioral, and we'll do the 90% as you normally are. And we'll see that 10% outperform so dramatically that then we can get on to the behavioral piece. But a lot of it is, once they're in there as well, is actually kind of saying, okay, well, we've got the ability to, a user comes to your website for the first time from an iPad. We can then send that email to them immediately saying download our iPad app, right? So it's getting them, we're really sort of running a lot of open office kind of stuff to actually get our customers to kind of start to do different and fun things with our system. We want them to challenge us, frankly.
Great. Any questions from the audience? Okay, hearing none. So let's talk about sort of Big Brother, right? Are we pushing the boundaries of Big Brother right now, do you think?
I don't think we're pushing it. I think that
have we opened the door just a little bit?
Yeah. I think we've opened it. I think that in this environment where we're trying to target relevance for our customers, we're trying to get the brand loyalty, that they are respected, they become brand aficionados, they are talking about the product. We're providing them with a service, and that's something that we really are doing for the end user as well. I mean, for our clients, if we're improving the end user experience for their clients, then then we're doing our job.
Right, Cassie?
Yeah, I think inevitably when you're talking about one-to-one marketing, you're going to end up pushing the boundary. So, one thing I think that we're really cognizant about balancing at Savored is we want to have this one-to-one approach, but also embrace cohort data. I think that's a really safe way to kind of skirt the bounds of what we're talking about here. I think oftentimes people say, okay, well, this user isn't engaging with my site and they're not engaging with email. Well, you need to take a step back and ask yourself why. It may be that they came in, an example that I can tell you from Savored Savored is we raised our Series A last January. We had a lot of press around that. That cohort of people is weaker. They need to be educated in a different way, and it's a different approach to than one-to-one that's a little bit less explicit. So I think people tend to be very gracious of that, where they get that you understand where they're coming from. You're treating them in a more educational light, but you're able to avoid some of these concerns of, hey, we know that you signed up through a Google-branded term on January 6, 2011.
I actually don't think that, I'm completely okay with it relative to other marketing channels, whether it's a retailer that's doing a cross-sell or an upsell, who's using all of this personal information about you anyways, or whether it's the display market where they're pixel tracking you, trying to behavioral target or remarket to you based on what you've seen in the past. I personally don't think that we're skirting on anything that's remotely dangerous, but that's my personal opinion.
Good. So then this is a good question for, I think, everyone in the room here in terms of, as we say here in 2011, we still talk a lot about the same things we talked in 2004, right? But just the speed of the delivery is obviously a lot quicker, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on, how it integrates with each other. As an industry, have we prepared ourselves particularly well as an industry, do you think, to succeed in the new 21st century marketing format?
I would say that talking of holding onto this data set that we're now holding onto, I think that the email industry has, had obviously the breaches that we've all heard about in security-wise, and I think that a lot of the email vendors out there have not secured their systems enough, and they have allowed for those leakages to happen. If you were, trusting your data with a provider, you need to make sure that they're secure. And I think that a lot of the ESPs out there, frankly, are not.
Excuse me? It's Della. I just wanted a question on the first.
I thought we were going to give this panel just one question without Della chiming in.
No, it's on the creepy factor. I just wonder people's thoughts, or you guys' thoughts on it. My viewers will never get to one-to-one for the simple reason that as soon as you do, you become morally responsible for what you do. So let me give you an example. Every time you come to my site and I put a banner for something unhealthy, alcohol, potato chips, whatever, you buy that. Sooner or later, there's going to be a lawsuit that says you made me buy all this alcohol and potato chips. And one of our clients actually, for certain things, diets in particular, does not segment at all. They send everybody the message, male, female, whatever it is, because they don't want you to see that they get a diet message and someone else doesn't. And I'm just interested, you kind of all said you hadn't got there. I'm just interested in where do you draw the line for your clients or for yourselves?
Have you read The Filter Bubble by any chance? Okay, so the filter bubble is kind of very focused on that whole kind of thing that if you're delivering the same thing to people and you're targeting more and more, that you keep going down that filter bubble, that you actually end up creating that person, right? So that person becomes that how you see them. So it is a case that you've got to actually use that, and you've got to use the entire data set to actually variate that and do the discovery part, as Jacob was talking to. You've got to do the discovery to actually create that. And I think that different businesses have different rules and different ethics to it, and I think that you definitely don't want to be to the point where you're convincing someone that they should be buying the alcohol every day and becoming an alcoholic. But at the same time, as an alcohol vendor, you would want people to buy your product. So I think that it's very much about finding that balance, but also because you can see the entire audience, that you can take into account what the audience is as a whole is looking at, and that holistic view can actually be transposed down to that individual.
Yeah, I think you can kind of hedge the risk a little bit by limiting relevance. So at Savored, we actually just instituted a rule where we'll only send one super targeted email per week, and we probably hit our users between 3 and 4 times on average each week. So, not to mention the fact that going back to this discussion of the filter bubble, when you are talking about discovery, you might actually be shooting yourselves in the feet by being highly relevant, because you're not giving people the opportunity to go out and discover those things that may have a higher cost associated with them that might benefit you from a revenue vantage point. So I think the takeaway is go after the relevance, but limit it. Don't make your business all about being the most targeted experience possible.
I think if I understand the question right, and I'm not justifying our marketing practices by any means, but we're in the business of trying to help people save money. But could somebody come to us and sue us for driving them to bankruptcy because they spent too much of their money? Possibly, but how can we, I mean, if we market from a place of fear, then we're not going to do anything effectively. So I think there's, I think everybody's going to be responsible for the products that they're marketing, but you still have to, and from a, I guess from a genuine place, but you definitely have to be proactive in pushing your product out. And that's the business of marketing.
I think you've got to also, you've got to know about the users that sign up to your site and they explicitly uncheck the box and say, I do not want your marketing emails, I do not want your emails, but I've signed up and I'm either conducting a transaction or I'm a publisher and I want to post a comment. But you need to know what that user's doing, what their interests are as well, because you now have a different segment. You can say, okay, look, I've got all these users that don't sign up to our email. What are their interests? What are they looking at? What are they doing? And why are they not signing up to our emails? So knowing about that broader picture, because if you're just looking at your email environment, you're not looking at your entire user base.
So we're all creepers up here, which is a good thing, right? So just a quick question in terms of a sort of one-word answer, really. Industry regulation versus self-regulation. Are you ready for it?
No.
You're even thinking about it.
We're definitely thinking about it. That's for sure. I mean, I think that there needs to be a mix of the both. Frankly, I would love to say that we could just do it as an industry. I think that is not the case because I don't think the technological and security aspects of a lot of the business, of a lot of the industry, is up there to actually be able to do that properly.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think especially working on the client side of the equation, just thinking about it in terms of practicality of someone who's sitting on the sail-through side of the fence, you don't want to be dependent on that industry regulation. You want client involvement there. That's your worst nightmare. This is going to be people who are kicking back. They're going to be pushing the limits of what they can do. So I don't know if we're ready for it, but I think that it's definitely going to need to come from both sides.
Right, Jacob?
It sounds uncomfortable to me.
Yeah.
Whether you're a retailer or whether you're in lead gen or whether you're a publisher, I think the needs are so different that, I mean, how can you apply one rule, one size fits all there? So,
Well, let's leave it up to our fearless leaders in Washington to do that, right?
And that's the real problem, though, right? I mean, because look at SOPA that went through. They were trying to get through, which was just ridiculous. I mean, the problem is it has to be well articulated, well written to actually be able to do this, and that's really the biggest fear, right? They're going to come in and put legislation down that doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think we're in a better place now than we were, in 2003. I mean, at least the dialogue is open, it's on the table, and we're looking at this thing in a very, I think, structured way, which we didn't. We sat in the FTC in April 2003. So I think there's going to be some structure. I think we'll have some rules on the road, but I think it'll be a balanced approach to the solution that we're all facing, right? Can you talk a little bit about in terms of, I don't know how we're doing for time here. Can you talk a little bit about in terms of what constraints you're thinking about in your respective business models looking ahead, right? Your respective brands. What's keeping you up at night?
Well, I can tell you, coming from the startup side of the world, it's always a resource battle. So I think one of the really interesting things, and I've talked with a lot of people here about this over the course of the past few days, is the fact that silos still exist within organizations. So there's still this critical need to get buy-in from engineering and product into making marketing that much more relevant. So that's something to me of, as sort of email solutions become that much more sophisticated, the ability to loop in engineers and product folks into that conversation, helps you get things further along the pipeline. But definitely what keeps me up at night is kind of the scalability of templatizing and what resource constraints look like.
Mm-hmm.
I think for us, we're fortunate as an organization to have buy-in from everybody from the C-level executives down to the engineers. So while resources are always a little thin, I think most organizations have or struggle with trying to get buy-in from your CEOs and your CMOs. They just want results. They don't really want to spend the hours and the resources to build data warehouses and to aggregate all this data, to crunch the numbers and to figure out what is most relevant to your users. So I think a lot of organizations really do struggle with adopting that as a mentality as an organization as a whole.
For us, I mean, as a vendor and everything, our biggest concern right now is hiring, but that's what keeps me up at night. To Cassie's point, we find when we go to a lot of our clients that they are completely development, resources constrained. Absolutely got no, focus. They want to do stuff in the email front, but they really don't have the resources and or the priorities to do that. To the point where we've been sending our programmers over to our clients and being like, here, we'll do one day and let's get it done. And it's such a simple implementation, but just getting the development cycles out of a customer is very difficult.
So I was having a conversation with my daughter last week, and she had, this is a young lady that had 5,000 texts a month and was a big MySpace fan and had, 7 million posts on Facebook. And over dinner, she told me that Facebook is losing its relevancy in the Gen Y market. And, sort of shifting gears a little bit, do you think, how does the social impact in your respective game plans?
I don't know that I would say that it's Facebook is losing relevance as much as it's that social proof is diversifying. So people are getting it from a lot of other avenues. So I feel like anyone I chat with who's kind of at new companies right now, the viral coefficient on their businesses is so high. There could be up to a third of their subscribers coming from word of mouth. So I think, whether it's Yelp or whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever else, it's just that people now have that many more outlets that maybe Facebook has lost its clout a little bit in that regard.
I think it's because all of our parents are on Facebook now. But I totally agree with Cassie. I think there's so many resources out there. So whether it's a Yelp or Google reviews or Amazon reviews, there's a lot of outlets where people are sharing their opinions on anything, whether it's a brand or a show or what have you. So I think I think it's a broader spectrum now, which we take full advantage of, and I think as most marketers, or as marketers, we should be looking at everything that's available to us.
Right, Neil?
I'd agree with all of that. Facebook is losing relevance. I don't know. I think there's just so much so much going into it now that it's just trying to find the right stuff in there is very difficult. I think that to social listening and figuring out what people are interested in on their Twitter feeds and that kind of stuff has a degree of targeting in there. I prefer to say that it's much better just to watch that individual user because they behave differently in that sort of public environment. But the social listening space is something that we're looking at as well to kind of increase that targeting capacity.
Right, so I know my daughter's watching the live feed, so there you go, you have it from the experts. Can you talk a little bit about the ROI engagement as it relates to, doesn't necessarily equate to immediate revenue? What are you seeing in terms of trending on your sites based on visitation?
I think it's just getting creative with KPIs. So, I think the obvious one that a lot of us talk about is kind of revenue per thousand, RPM, but it goes back to what we were talking about before about timing and placement. You need to be cognizant that people aren't going to be ready to buy every single day. So what metrics can you put in place that you're tracking and might be able to get them down the line at a point they are ready to buy? So one thing that we might look at is like page views per clicker. So even if you're not purchasing, if you're coming and you're looking at 50 different restaurants on Savor.com, we know that there's an intent for you to dine at some point, but maybe the price isn't right, maybe the times aren't right. So let's watch you closely and try to figure out what the math is, where that sweet spot is, where we should be remarketing to you. So I think it's really just looking at your business and finding out, discovering some unique metrics that will ultimately parlay into revenue.
Jacob, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally agree. We've gotten certainly creative with the way we look at our metrics. So in a similar fashion, we'll look at our clicks per clicker. So when we look at our personalized email versus our non-personalized email, that number almost triples. And so while it doesn't necessarily translate to immediate ROI or increased revenue, we know that increased activity is definitely providing a more relevant experience to the user. And even on the revenue side, with lifetime value, we've seen a higher lifetime value. So you have to look beyond just that email campaign. You have to really look at the life cycle of your average subscriber, how long they're in your subscriber database, and what your overall lifetime value is. For us, for example, we just passed Black Friday, Cyber Monday, which is our biggest peak season of the year. And so we actually invest the entire year to try and get people ready for that shopping season because we know that there's ROI once we've passed it. So we just look at it as investing ahead of the curve.
As an internal KPI for us, we actually look at clicks per day. And the reason we do that is we look across our entire network of customers because we're trying to drive relevance for our clients, and therefore if we're doing that correctly, we're elevating those clicks on a daily basis for all of our clients. So for us, it's a trending KPI to watch that and to make sure that we're always increasing that relevance and getting it there, and to continue that the customer lifetime value piece, which is for us the thing that we look at all the time with from our publishers to e-commerce. I mean, with our publishers, when you're sending 200 subject lines in a day, and hitting those users with a very unique and individual email, the customer lifetime value is more than 10x. I mean, the engagement of that user is dramatically different. And it's about finding that frequency. So we will proactively opt people down. We'll proactively opt them on a frequency level and get them back into engagement. So if we decrease the frequency and increase the relevancy, we can then get that user back into the cycle of looking at our email every day. Then we can actually get them back into sort of that sine wave of engagement rather than that normal drop-off that you always see.
Can you ever have too much data?
No. Did we rehearse that? We should have rehearsed that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's good timing on that. So, sort of a hardball question here. I just thought of it. How deep and wide is your organization's privacy policy?
Ours is. We work on it actually ongoing all the time. We hold a lot of PII and we hold a lot of interest data. We protect it very well, and we work on making sure that our internal account handlers cannot access the data. Right? I mean, we allow the system to target to an individual level, but we don't want our account handlers or anyone else in the organization able to access that kind of individual data that we have. So we actually, work on that quite dramatically, and also, go do quarterly events with our employees to make sure that they understand the entire privacy policy.
Right, you don't want to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, right? In terms of that, Cassie, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Same thing. I mean, we're constantly evolving. So I think the greatest strategy for us is just talking to people in the industry and understanding what issues they've run into, and then trying to build our practices around that. I think working with our ESP is obviously a great way to do that. But I think the challenge of a lot of smart businesses is they are so keen on hitting the ground running that oftentimes that's left in the dust a little bit, but it's critically important that you're circling back around and figuring out what you need to be doing there.
Right. Dennis, question?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I pissed off the audio guy earlier. Sorry about that. Hi, Dennis Damon from Eloqua. Actually, the question that I would have asked, and I'd be interested to kind of re-ask this again, is that, so your question was, do you guys have a privacy policy, right? And most companies have website privacy policies. The question I think should be asked is, do you have a privacy policy internally that's different from the website? Because the website applies to visitors to your systems, but what sorts of things do you do around security, training, data handling, data governance training, and privacy policies within marketing, right? I think that's the question that should be asked.
Yeah, so we absolutely have an internal protocol that's very, very different than the privacy policy on our site. So some examples are the folks who actually have access to a lot of the data. So again, we're looking at very, very granular data on all of our consumers. So there's probably 2 people in our company who are ever working with that information. And it's it may have relevancy to operations or customer support, but it's figuring out the right restraints on putting on different people in the organization. So I think that's absolutely critical. I think it goes into, a prime example here is Facebook Connect. If you have employees that are in administrator accounts and they log in through Facebook Connect, their Facebook account is compromised, well, there's all your member data. So it's, definitely putting in internal controls and regulations around that. It's super important.
I'd give an example on what, for our customers, we actually don't allow them access to their own raw email addresses. And we don't, and they shouldn't need it. I mean, if you how many people in this room can log into their ESP and download a list of, 1 million email addresses right now in this room? How many can people do that? Account handlers? Right. That's a security hole. I'm sorry, but it's a massive security hole.
Jacob, any thoughts on that?
Well, we actually don't have an internal policy, but at the same time, we don't collect
that.
We don't collect too much personal data, more just behavioral and kind of shopping. And we anonymize most of our data, and we also encrypt all the links that are coming from the email. So we try to put a lot of security practices in place, and then also just internally, there's only a few people that, especially on the engineering side, that have access to all of that behavioral data. So it's pretty well guarded.
So should we open up for some questions?
Maybe one more.
Okay.
There you go, right at the back.
There's the Stephanie Miller question for every panel. So this has been great, thank you. And when you're talking about personalization and creating these intelligence-driven experiences for customers, does that mean that that there's no place for like a generic newsletter or for things that are not personalized? So in that mix, what are you finding is the right percentage for the customer, right? So should you have 80% of your messages be personalized, or is it okay if it's more like 20%? You know what I mean? How does that work in your experience?
So what we found to be the most interesting finding in our personalization project is that while the content, while users really enjoy the personalized content, subject lines for some reason users don't really are not attracted by personalized subject lines for us. So if you shop at Bloomingdale's and we say great deals at Bloomingdale's, there's actually been better results, better open rates by showing a generic subject line. So the best deals we have for you today. And so the takeaway for us with that was maybe it's kind of like the Sunday Times mentality where people are just used to seeing the Sunday Times. They know what to expect in it, but you don't want to call it something new every week. So there's a certain comfort in knowing what's familiar to you. And then in terms of the balance of content, we've tested 50-50, we've tested 70-30, and we're still kind of toying around with that. But we do know that whenever we provide interesting content that's good for discovery, that always does well for us. So I think as long as you're constantly testing a discovery component to your email, I would say you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I would just follow up on that, and I like to say that I think that relevance and specialization are kind of the yin and the yang, where they need to exist together in harmony, but it's very, very tough to figure out, what should be coming from where. So, truthfully, I think it's a very, very, tough mental battle because if you exist in different markets, you're going to have different content available in those places, and you can't make one general rule of thumb. So, the approach that we like to take is, be mathematical about it. Go in there and see in the different places you are, where are you getting more return by going after these emails that, you don't know that your customers are going to like, but they're, general, it's curated editorial versus things that are particularly relevant to their, behavioral history. And look at it that way. Just let the numbers speak.
I think it's different for every business as well. I mean, I think that publishers to e-commerce to it's different for each and every one. We have publishers that we behaviorally target the entire content of their newsletters, and we have others that editorially score their content so that they can say, the top these three articles are going to go to everybody, and then we want the rest of it done. And I would say that finding this relationship, it doesn't have to be done just in email because it can be tested on site too. I mean, if you go to businessinsider.com/your-news. There's our behavioral content right there aimed at that user that's viewing that on site, which is in conjunction with the emails that you're getting in that and keeping that relationship going. But that also enables you to test that on site in a much more effective manner because you're not sending a campaign and testing against it. You're actually testing it in real time with real users.
Wonderful. Well, I want to say thank you to this panel. And really thank you to everybody, all the speakers today. So thank you very much. Round of applause.